Thank you very much. This is going to be a culture shock because of my not perfect English after these perfect native English speakers, so please excuse that. 2 years ago, at the AEC conference, I had the honor to give a presentation about the breach of the rule of law by governments and supranational organizations to save the financial system. Also, our generation has learned at this time crises are used to expand power of the state without ever dismantling it again. In 2019, neither me nor most of us, I guess, could have imagined what was to come. And only 2 months after this speech, COVID arrived. We thought the worst, with disregard to the expansion of state power, lies behind us, but the corona measures taught us otherwise. The question is, what's now? Is the worst yet to come or not? In this presentation, I would like to use some of current political events of the last 20 months to show that the events surrounding the pandemic not only serve to manage the pandemic, but could also form the foundation for a total restriction of freedom to save the climate. The thesis: crises are used by governments to expand the power of the state without ever thinking about the reduction. COVID measures and lockdowns serve as a blueprint for climate measures and lockdowns. In addition to crises, threats are, of course, also proven means of expanded power. And there are hardly better times to expand that scenarios than those when the people are already weakened by an ongoing crisis. It's a strategy of tension. Let me point out some rules for this threat building. Threats always come from the outside, like the virus came from China, terrorism is coming from the Middle East. Threats mostly come from intangibles, the pandemic, the climate change, and threats always refers to future events, because in the present the threat could be checked against reality. A new truth is created by experts and scientists mostly engaged by the governments. What will happen in the future can, of course, never be predicted, but assertions and forecasts of so-called experts can also not be disapproved. For example, experts say the climate change in 10 years will be +2 degrees. Nobody can say it won't be this way. Thus, the threat creator makes oneself that's a strong word for me, unassailable. I hope that's the right word. And there comes a useful side effect with this threat building. All people who criticize these developments in the future can then easily be called deniers. The critical thinkers endanger the well-being of children and children's future. Society is divided in the good ones and in the bad ones. But back to the crisis we are living in right now. Even if politicians are jubilant that the pandemic is already over or will soon be over, the real consequences of the corona crisis and government intervention will only unfold in the coming months. I want to quote now 3 consequences of the crisis and the measures against it. The first one is the medical and psychological consequences. Postponed medical operations, isolation, educational and development consequences for children. Second one are the constitutional consequences we are experiencing now. And the third is economic consequences. Not only we, the people, have been quarantined, also the rule of law has been quarantined, as I said before. During the pandemic, all major principles of the rule of law have been broken. Governments restricted personal freedoms. During Corona, we were not ruled by duly constituted law. we were ruled by executive orders. They have taken away our personal choice over our health and bodies, trampled on the right to bodily integrity, and they linked fundamental rights to a vaccination certificate, as we all know. Governments prevented entrepreneurs and employees from production, and governments made top-down decisions, especially in Austria and Germany, who is allowed to open his business and who is not allowed to. I want to point out now some economic consequences. Everybody remembers the Eyjafjallajökull, which was a volcano in Ireland. When this broke out, it took several months to repair the supply chain. Disruption of the air travel industry. Due to the COVID measures, the supply chain problem is building up now, but this time it's getting up to all sectors. Especially in the entire transport sector, confusion is not resolved yet, and we are guessing it will take years till everything is on its place where it's planned. I picked out this chart. This chart was posted by Financial Times. It's very interesting, the postponed bankruptcies. You can see here the recession quarters, where the zero point is. There's the 100%, and you see the recession of the financial crisis brought us a plus of 35 bankruptcies, 35% bankruptcies. Other recessions brought us a plus up to 20–30%, and this recession with the great lockdown, we had a decrease of bankruptcies of 30%. So now is the question, was this kind of crisis management helpful for the economy, for the people who were willing to produce, or was it damaging? I want to point out one story you probably don't know, what happened in Vienna during Corona phases. There was an executive order that the city can stake in private companies at risk with 25%. What leads us to the next question. The next crisis will allow the city to take new money, to buy 50%, 70%, 90%. Can crisis trigger a creeping nationalization? That's the question. What was the first measurement governments did when Corona occurred? Of course, they are doing always the same. The governments increased the national debt and indebted the people. This is a chart of the United States deficit, and you can see the amplitude is getting higher and higher. We have almost a doubled amplitude from the financial crisis to the national debt to deficit in 2020. And that leads to the next question, who will pay the bill and how we will pay the bill? Are we going to do this with higher taxes? In Austria and Germany, I don't think that's possible. Will the government spending be reduced? What do you believe? I don't think it's possible. It's the least likely option. And we can repair it, as we all know, with high inflation, which is already taking place right now, and we will see in the further months. The governments went on a spending spree, which again leads us to the question, are these measurements helpful or damaging? One interesting point in fighting the pandemic was that almost all governments were acting in the same way. They used the same crisis management techniques. And if we think about what in former times happened, the international community of states, as well as the three letters organizations like UNO, WHO, and others, couldn't manage to solve the world hunger. They couldn't manage to increase hygienic standards in the third world countries. They failed to establish world peace. But in fighting the virus, they are singing the same tune. But why did they act so uniformly? Why did they impose similar measures on different cultures, on different economic measures, on different cultures, on different economic systems, on different climate zones, and on different seasons of the year? That should be unlogic that they did all the same all over the globe. Were those measures the only one option? Was it shared and simultaneous incompetency? Was it the best for the population of each region or country? Or was it the most favored method of increasing the power of governments? But it takes two to tango. History shows that whenever the people accept the most absurd and illegal measures without resistance, governments get the taste of authoritarian rule. Especially climate hysterics are here ready to exploit this. I want to mention here, for the non-German, non-Austrian people, we have a very famous person, got very famous during the pandemic. He's called Karl Lauterbach, and he's likely to be the next health minister of Germany. Also knowing nothing about the climate science, he has already spoken several times openly in different TV channels in favor of a climate lockdown. So he's not an expert on climate, he's an expert on health. And speaking about the climate lockdown, this allows two thoughts. He would never have come up with this idea without the test balloon pandemic lockdown. And how can it be that a health expert raves about the next lockdown, which has little to do with his expertise, shortly after the end of the COVID lockdown? This guy knew, okay, he knew then, they know now, never let a good crisis go to waste. That's what I wanted to point out with the economic measurements of the government. And let's see now what's in EU's no crisis waste pipeline. We see they impose, or they try to impose, the digital euro. They try to impose an asset register because of the pandemic. That leads to total survivors and total control. ECB goes green without any mandate. All the central banks are trying to help the climate without any mandate. And I don't know how they have the idea to do this and to come up with this. This is pretty interesting. And the EU, and this is very interesting, the last point. The EU allocates 25% of its budget to climate protection measures. And this happened in year 2020, when all the governments and EU had budget problems, because it was the most expensive year for those organizations and states. And exactly at this time, when it was the most expensive year, they are taking 25% of the budget. So what I tried to describe before, exactly when we are weakest, they are hitting us with the next threat. So, and this was just as I have waited for when I was doing my presentation. This was on Monday. This was a Green Monday. Prince Charles claims a vast military-style campaign is required to carry through a fundamental economic transition. This is world class. This is world class, and I don't know what I would have done without this statement, because this statement tells that my thoughts maybe Right. So I'm using the biggest climate expert in the world. She's really has the most knowledge of climate, and she wants us to panic. I don't want you to panic about her. So it's the wrong audience. I mean the public outside. I don't want you to panic about this. I don't want you to panic about this. But I would like you to panic about this. In 2030, you will own nothing and be happy about it. This is Klaus Schwab, but I think everybody knows him. And I want you to panic about this, expanded government powers. And that leads me to my final slider here. The Leviathan goes green. It's a very dangerous time for us. And it's time to race against all those things they try. Thank you very much.
For one quick question, if somebody has one. Yes. Right, yeah, right, second row. Here we go.
Thank you. This seems to be a kind of libertarian session, right? And my question is the following. You guys seem to put freedom above everything. How is that different from the socialists who put equality above everything? What I'm concerned about is that if you reject reasonable policies with respect to anything, you may not be credible when you reject unreasonable policies related to climate. So is there something which is more important than freedom, in your view?
No.
Thank you.
And there you have it.
No, I just wanted to point out, I'm not a denier that the climate could be a problem. But, you know, what I don't understand is how can those people who tell us we will have a temperature increase of 2 degrees for the next 20, they don't know. I don't know either, but they don't know, but they act like they know. And that's the danger about it, because they have numerous experts telling us how hot it's going to be. You see the weather charts in television. When we have 25 degrees, it's red, you know? This propaganda, I don't understand this propaganda because they cannot know how the climate will develop, and I don't know it either. But I'm not a climate change denier, but how can you be that sure? That's the big question about it. And if you are not sure, freedom is more important than unsure science.
Thank you very much, Thomas Bachheimer, everyone.
Thank you. Sorry for the inconveniences.